and welcome to Soon Up PC, where it right now is 19:33 in the evening, and right here, as of right now, today, we will be finishing that political correctness debate from Monk Debate that they were probably having like a month ago by this time, because there have been so many bloody things to discuss. Why are we going to finish it? Well, because of two reasons. One main reason, really, another which is not that important. The one that's not that important is that, well, we have not that much to talk about anymore, and the main importance is that I'm getting bloody bored from this thing. So that means we're gonna shove some things in there that might feel a bit forced. They might not be represented as much as I thought they would at one point in time, so that's why I wrote them in my notes. But now I'm gonna take it up in a quite a speedily way. And I know I'm saying speedy, you're probably gonna be like, can't he get through all the points yet? I mean, he's talking about so many vastly different things all of the time. Well, so I'm thinking like, oh my days, I'm moving through them so fast. I only spent like 10 minutes discussing the letter D today, or the letter M or whatever, right? And I'm already going to say sorry for myself for tomorrow, because I'm probably going to be a bit drained. Why, you ask? Well, thank you for showing an appreciation into my life. Well, it's because I'm going to defend this bad boy. Yeah, my own very little contribution to business ethics. Sorry, business science, I mean, because such a thing does exist. But it's so beautiful. But this is the unrevised version, so really, who gives it? Wow, that sounded way louder than I thought it would. But yeah, as I said, it's the unrevised version, so who really gives a shit now, do they? Anyway, mates. Anyway, we're going to start off with Michael Dyson's point of view in the Monk Debate. I know, people are gonna be crazy. It's gonna be tearing their hair out. They're like, wow, he only mentioned one of the sides. Wonder if he's going to mention who was on each side today again, even though he's mentioned that in every single video so far. And you're right, we're probably going to mention that on one side, on the negative side. I'm just saying pro because I tend to align myself with that point of view. Not that I was before. On one side, we had Stephen Fry and Jordan B. Peterson, who was pro-individualistic approach. They said that political correctness harms society more than it helps, or not explicitly, but they kind of stated that political correctness isn't progress. And in my ears, yeah, when I hear that, I'm thinking it hurts society more than it helps, hence not progress. Maybe plus minus zero, right? Maybe a stalemate at best. On the other hand, we had Michael Dyson and Michelle Goldberg, who were all pro. They were all for political correctness, yeah? They were saying that political correctness is what makes society moves forward in this modern time, it's what keeps the modern valuations of minorities and women in check with everybody else. Oh wow, in check, that sounded really weird. Sounded like the opposite to what it actually tried to do, what they argued that it tried to do. Rather, it elevates everybody to the same level, stands for equality. Yeah, am I right, people? Am I right? Maybe not. I was actually on that side to begin with before I watched the the debate, and then I actually changed sides, which was kind of open-minded by myself. Yeah, open-minded of me, because that's a humblest way of putting it. No, but they actually presented some fairly structured arguments on the other side, and I might be biased to the people who were talking about it, and I was like, that might actually be true. Anyway, I'm leaving it in the description below so you can go and check it out for yourself. I highly recommend it. It's about 2 hours long. They don't really discuss political correctness all that often, which you will know when we're getting into the first piece of discussion today. But it's worth a watch nonetheless. And what are we beginning? As I was kind of sliding into before, we're talking about that Michael Dyson, who, when he was starting talking, I thought this guy is hilarious. Talking with plain English, he's getting the audience with him, yeah. A really good speaker, really connecting on the audience level. Can really talk to the average Joe about complex issues such as... Now, I don't really know what he does, and I wouldn't argue that political correctness is complex enough, but he probably can talk to people, the average Joe, with this language and actually describe very complex issues. So I thought, you know what, here's a guy that I would like to watch some more of. Here is a guy with a sound moral compass, so to say, with a good view on society and a good view to life. And then I was proven wrong. Isn't that the worst? The worst is when you kind of created a preemptive assumption of someone based on nothing more than perhaps looks and like a opening statement, and just like, either this guy is an idiot or this guy is bloody smart. And it's always bad when you think this guy's bloody smart, and then when they start talking and they kind of try to exhale or try to elevate their own opinion or their perspective on the subject, it just goes from, wow, you're smart, to, wow, this is not what we're talking about. I mean, not that what you're saying is wrong by any means, because it wasn't. It probably wasn't, right? I'm probably not the best person to judge that, but what he said was probably true, but it didn't have that much to do with the overarching debate that they were having about political correctness. And I know, you're just being there on the seat of your chair and you're like, but what was he discussing? Well, it was basically talking about slavery in the US 300 years ago, and how every person who's black basically has a harder time in society because they're black. Yet again, I might not be the expert here on talking about that, since, I live on the other side of the world to the US, so I haven't really grown up there. I'm grown up in a society which I would argue, I might be wrong, but that I would argue is a lot more equal when it comes to, well, basically everything. Do I like that? Yes, obviously. Can we be better at it? Yes, obviously we can. Are we at true equality? No, we're not. Is equality that everybody are the same? No, it isn't. Is equality that everybody have the same opportunities? Yes, it is. From my perspective in the world, if I meet someone, I would say that everybody had the same opportunity to be friends with me, because I treat everybody equally. Okay, good. That's kind of my perspective on this entire thing, which may very well be the reason why I kind of looked down on this entire perspective throughout the debate. Not that it might not be true. It could be true, right? It could be a very pessimistic view of society, in my opinion, but it could be true nonetheless. It could be that my view of different countries' societies is way too optimistic. That could absolutely be the case. However, I really hope that isn't the case, but still, it could be. So he was basically talking about, a man starting in a race that's 300 years behind or 100 years behind has a hard time of catching up. Good metaphor. Not going to take away that. I think he paraphrased someone that at the top of my head, can't really remember. But he was basically going on and talking about, minorities' place in society, which is a branch of political correctness. I fully understand that, right? I mean, political correctness is here to elevate the equality of everybody, so that everybody is on an even playing field. However, what Michael Dyson did was that he only discussed, so to say, black people or Afro-Americans, or however you want to categorize it, right? People. And he didn't really move away from that minority. Let's just say this. He discussed a set minority and didn't move away from that set minority in his discussion and in his perspective, which brought even though it was true what he was saying, perhaps, it was a very limited view on minorities, since it was a very biased and very favored view of one set minority. Now, my problem with that entire side of the debate, really, the people who were pro-political correctness, and that includes then Michelle Goldberg, was that she also had a very set perspective on the entire debate. She was discussing a lot about women's rights in society. Now, that could be because she was the only woman in this debate of 4 people. That she might feel like, well, I am here, I have a responsibility to actually raise this point of view, to raise this debate, so that it's actually getting talked about. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, we should try to strive towards an equal society. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that the debate was not just about minorities and women. It was also about how we utilize language, why we utilize language, how different groups are created, what new groups are created because of political correctness. There was so much more to be discussed, and especially how do we move forward in the future with this term, with this concept of political correctness. So even though they were raising a valid points on their side of the spectrum, of their side of the argument, their side of the debate, it didn't really carry over the entire debate, because it just sounded like they were repeating the same stuff over and over and over again. Not saying that they were bad at what they did and that their points of view weren't valid, just that it sounded like an echo every time it came around to their point of view. It was always the same stuff. Now, one can argue that when Jordan B. Peterson talks on the other side, you can say that, well, that's echoed as well, because it's not always about, but it's often about the radical left that is doing something, right? It's often about the restriction of speech. Also, two very important two very important parts to actually pressure here: that freedom of speech shouldn't be oppressed, and that neither political side should be skewed in favor of the other. However, it was kind of repetitive at times. Now, Stephen Fry, on the other hand, kind of the guy who really elevated the entire discussion in my point of view, yeah? From my perspective, from where I was standing, yeah? Because he was always trying to say that, well, what we're discussing right now, sure, we're discussing branches of political correctness, but we're not really discussing political correctness overall and what we really should be discussing. You see the difference there? So Stephen Fry was always, it kind of felt like Stephen Fry was the anchor in the entire situation, right, in the entire debate. The people were going all over the place, but Stephen Fry was the one anchored position that kind of dragged them all back towards him and towards the discussion and the debate. Which in a sense, if you have one person on one of the sides doing that instead of the, let's say, commentator, the one that should be directing the discussion, then it tends to be biased in that direction. And that's kind of the feeling that I got walking out from there. Not that I was biased in a bad way, I guess, because they were kind of discussing what they should be discussing, right? So, and brought in more points of view. But I guess what I would like to say is that I think that Stephen Fry didn't really get to elevate his points of view, which was a bit bad in my case, because I really wanted to see his points of view on the discussion, but it wasn't really the environment of discussing that. Another thing that I would like to introduce as well, if we're just going through all the points, is that if you look at the different sides, I know that I've been talking previously that Stephen Fry and Jordan B. Peterson on one side, even though they have conflicting views, perfectly represented what they were trying to make of this, right? They were trying to say that even if you have different perspectives, different opinions in one side, or in many regards, as long as you agree in one aspect, you should be able to unify over that and talk and build from that, which they also did. Actions speaking louder than words. Whilst on the other side of the argument, the very thing that I think that both Peterson and Fry were kind of criticizing was this idea of identity politics. You know, diversity that can be seen rather than intellectual diversity that we actually want. Because on the other side, the side that was pro-political correctness. Now, this could just be pure coincidence, right? But it felt like there were two white males on one side, very different intellectually. Not to say that anyone was smarter than the other, but it's just that they have very different points of view. Kind of pushing this idea that it doesn't really matter what you look like as long as you're intellectually diverse. Whilst on the other hand, there were two people who looked diverse. Let's say when you look at them, you can see that they're different. One guy was Afro-American, black, whatever term you want to put in there, whilst the other one was a woman. You know, however we can phrase this so that it doesn't sound offensive, but it was more like diversity that can be seen. You know, there was a man, it was a woman, it was a white person, it was a black person, it was, you know, you could see the diversity. Was on the other on the other side of the debate you couldn't. But on one side of the debate where Peterson and Fry there was an intellectual diversity, as I said, that kind of were discussing a wide array of different topics and try to really elevate the discussion, whilst on the other hand, where they were seeing diversity, it wasn't really the case. They were kind of sticking to their guns, sticking to their perspective, and not really elevating or building on that perspective, which I thought was a perfect example of what both of them tried to show was good with either side of the discussion, and that, well, the intellectual diversity, in my point of view, was so vastly superior to the viewed diversity that also was presented, and was a perfect example of when this can backfire. So I thought that was pretty interesting about the debate. And as I said, it was also very biased minority focused on one side, which I didn't particularly enjoy at all. I thought it was very weird to take that kind of stance in a discussion. And then I would also like to elevate Fry's response at 1 hour and 29 minutes exactly. Response and quote from Oscar Wilde. Seems like political correctness is more catered to being right than being effective. And that's obviously not Oscar Wilde's quote, because I don't think that political correctness was around at that time. But he was basically saying something along the lines, and obviously I'm going to paraphrase here because I don't really remember on the top of my head. But Oscar Wilde was Stephen Fry was quoting Oscar Wilde, and I'm paraphrasing that. Yeah, context, right? So that you don't go out and be like, oh, Oscar Wilde sounded like an idiot. No, that's just me. The entire idea that we can't really toy with ideas anymore, that we don't have this... what you would say, this university ethics anymore, that where different opinions, almost no matter how skewed or weird or extreme they are, can't really be presented and discussed in a sophisticated manner anymore. As is I think it was the Oxford ethics, but I think that Stephen Fry was calling it the general university ethics. It doesn't really apply in a world with political correctness, because as I've been stating even before we started talking about this, political correctness tends to shut down a lot of discussions that could have been discussed and wasn't a danger to society as they were right there, but kind of preemptively shutting them down by the masses versus the minorities, more than they kind of elevate these kinds of things, which is a problem. And the problem with that is, like, let me just take the best kind of analogy that I can make. An economics student, right? So imagine that you have a really big company which doesn't have that much competition. However, the barrier of entry is basically free, so anyone can enter the market. And so, by the virtue of Adam Smith, 1776, I would believe, and the invisible hand, this should work itself out so that supply meets demand, and the price would probably be lowered in comparison to if it was a monopoly in the industry. If, as I said, the barrier of entry is low or near to non-existent. However, political correctness acts in such a way that imagine if the big company was shutting down, able to actively shut down and kind of raise the barrier of entry for specific companies to the place where they can't afford it every time a new company tried to enter, no matter capital and resources, that is. That's kind of how I view political correctness, and kind of my take on Oscar Wilde's quote, or Stephen Fry's take on the quote and how he presented it. That it doesn't really apply anymore because political correctness is shutting down different ideas more than it elevates them. And the problem with this is that in a market with less competition, well, prices are going to be elevated because the company doesn't have to cater to the customer, because they know that, well, if we raise the prices, since we're the only distributor, people are going to buy it anyway because they kind of need it, if there is a need there. And I would argue that there is a need for a diverse thinking. Yet again, coming back to this idea of intellectual diversity. There needs to be intellectual diversity and diversity of discussion everywhere, all around the globe, I'd say, in order to spark progress and spark change, which political correctness then is argued to be hindering more than elevating. So in order to do that, I kind of lost my train of thought here. Anyway, the entire idea is basically that a big company can shut down smaller companies in this world, and that's kind of what political correctness does to other people's train of thought before they kind of get elevated and actually become something, because political correctness is preemptively saying that's wrong because we want to be right, we don't want to be effective, we want to be right about that is wrong, so we want to say we're right, you're wrong. We don't want to elevate that point of view because that creates kind of a controversial situation which we do not like. And that means less diverse topics and discussions, which leads to less progress. So even though Michael Dyson and Michelle Goldberg said political correctness is the same thing as progress, I would argue, based on intellectual diversity or rather based on the merits of intellectual diversity and discussion diversity as a driver for change and for progress, to be wrong. And I would then stand on the side of Michael Jordan, Jordan B. Peterson and Stephen Fry, even though I actually began skewed to the other side of Goldberg and Dyson. So what's the story of this? Be diverse in your mind and be diverse in your thoughts, rather than be diverse as you look. And keep an open mind so that you can actually do that effectively. Yeah, that was everything from me, mates. Tomorrow I'm having my defense of my opposition. I can already feel it in my bones. I'm shivering everywhere. This is going to be amazing. It's going to be exciting. Have a nice one, mates. And tomorrow, as I said, I'm going to do the thing that I do best. Talk, and hopefully listen a bit as well. Have a nice one, mates. See ya.